Okay, so this one is pretty self-explanatory. I'll be taking every UFC champion since the decade began and ranking their overall performance in the UFC since 2020. I won't just be looking at their title run either. Any fighter who held an undisputed title at any point this decade will be evaluated as either a champion or a former champion, and their entire body of work since 2020 will be taken into consideration. Nothing before 2020 will factor in. There's 27 champions, ranked by a criteria that factors in their wins, their losses, the level of competition, the level of skill they showed, and the overall prestige of the fights they found themselves in. So let's just get into it. 27. Petr Yan. He's the only guy in the entire video with a losing record, and in some alternate universe he could have won the Sean O'Malley fight, the Sterling rematch, and avoided a disqualification had he not kneed the Funkmaster in the face. But yeah, Yan's 2-4 record puts him below everyone else. 26. Juliana Pena. Beating Amanda Nunes is something we can never take away from Juliana Pena, but after watching the Lioness recapture her title with a one-sided thrashing of Pena in the rematch, I think the general consensus on her skills is that the first Nunes fight didn't exactly give us the best sense of where she's actually at. Number 25. Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza might have won her title through one of the most bizarre and boring fights in UFC history, but her run at 115 pounds has still been quite good. The fact that she managed to rise up and put herself in line for a title shot 7 years after initially losing her belt against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, it's pretty damn impressive. Number 24. Stipe Miocic. Though he did certainly look his age in a very cautious and apprehensive performance against Francis Ngannou, Stipe's legacy is already set in stone, and his sole victory in 2020 over Daniel Cormier is still a great one. 23. Henry Cejudo. For a guy who had just spent years on the sidelines, Henry Cejudo still managed to look pretty good in there against Aljamain Sterling. It was his first fight since a TKO victory of Dominic Cruz, and though we did miss a good chunk of his prime due to his inactivity, I for one am certainly looking forward to seeing what he can still do at bantamweight. Number 22. Glover Teixeira. It's one hell of a story. Glover's only 2 losses of the decade came in title fights, and his wins over Jan Blachowicz, Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos, all by way of finish I'll point out, are some of the best wins you can get as a light heavyweight. 21. Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill may have been forced to relinquish his hold on the 205-pound title before he truly legitimized himself as champion, but all things considered, it has been a pretty fantastic decade for this now former king of the division. 6 wins, a no contest, and a single loss to Paul Craig. It's certainly a great start. Number 20. Alexa Grasso. A solid run of form in Alexa Grasso's natural weight class eventually led to her dethroning the divisional GOAT, Valentina Shevchenko. Can she repeat the feat? Only time will tell, but that win alone gets her a spot in the top 20. Number 19. Alexandre Pantoja. Long seen as one of the most underrated fighters in the flyweight division, Pantoja managed to have a major breakout performance in an instant classic 5-round collision with the fan favorite champion Brandon Moreno. In many ways, it was a fight that could have gone either way, but if one thing's for certain, it's that Pantoja has shown himself to be clearly elite. Number 18. Weili Zhang. 3-2 doesn't look like a particularly convincing record, but those 2 losses to Rose Namajunas don't tell the full story of Weili Zhang's performances and her clear evolution. She went to war with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, absolutely destroyed her in a rematch, and gave Carla Esparza a lesson in the levels that exist within the 115-pound division to recapture her belt. She might just be the best strawweight in the world. Number 17. Deiveson Figueiredo. It's crazy to think that the flyweight division was on the verge of getting cut entirely before Henry Cejudo, and then later Deiveson Figueiredo showed the UFC just how great it could be. And for Figueiredo, he brought new levels of physicality to 125 pounds that really made for one hell of a run at the top. His quadrilogy with Brandon Moreno is of course essential viewing, but his earlier championship fights against Joseph Benavidez and Alex Perez are also quite brutal and quite entertaining. Number 16. Alex Pereira. Pereira debuted in the UFC, beat one of the pound-for-pound kings in the sport, lost his title against that very same man, and then beat a former 205-pound champion in his light heavyweight debut. There are a lot of asterisks attached to Pereira's run, but you cannot deny that his MMA career has been pretty astonishing so far, and his proximity to a second belt is kinda crazy. Number 15. Rose Namajunas. In my opinion, one truly terrible performance doesn't take away from all the great work that Rose Namajunas has been doing in her career. Like I said about Zhang before, Rose could also still be the best 115-pounder in the world, but the Esparza fight certainly left us all with a bad taste in our mouth. Now returning as a flyweight, there is big pressure on her to turn it all around. Number 14. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Yeah, Nurmagomedov makes it onto our list on the back of one victory in 2020 over Justin Gaethje. It was one hell hell of a performance, and if he had had even one more fight, he would have risen way higher on this list. But the Khabib era was pretty much ending before this decade got going, so at number 14 he remains. Number 13, Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno is as responsible for the flyweight resurgence as Cejudo, Figgy and Pantoja have been, perhaps even more so. And with the most impressive numerical record of the lot in terms of title fights, I think Moreno has been the flyweight who has defined the 2020s so far, even after seeing him narrowly lose in his last fight. Number 12, Valentina Shevchenko. One loss doesn't erase the dominance of Valentina Shevchenko prior to UFC 285, but it does keep her out of the top 10. It'll be interesting to see how the Bullet rebounds from this setback, and I do get the feeling that people are underestimating her ability to get it all back again. So for now, she comes in at number 12, but I reckon 2024 will be a big year for Shevchenko. Number 11, Yuri Prochazka. A personal favorite of mine for years, Yuri Prochazka has totally exceeded all of my expectations upon signing for the UFC. He was always good fun and highly dangerous, but to win UFC gold and score finishes over opponents like the three he has fought, he's the man. There's just no doubt about it. Number 10, Francis Ngannou. On certain levels, I'm very happy for Francis Ngannou because beyond the Fury fight and the money and the freedom, he just did not get on with Dana White and the UFC. And the fact that he is able to do what he's doing right now is great. But Ngannou went 3-0 in the 2020s, and I just wish he had stuck around longer and fought more of these new age heavyweights, the Aspinalls, the Pavloviches, and of course John Jones. Number 9, Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman is one of the greatest welterweights of all time, and one of the finest fighters of his era, but getting smoked like that by Leon Edwards is unfortunately going to be the highlight that defines his legacy. Not to the hardcores or anything, but that Rocky moment was just ripped from the pages of a film script, and though his wins over Colby, Jorge and Gilbert are all quite nice, I just can't put Usman any higher after losing to Edwards twice. Number 8, Amanda Nunes. She's the GOAT, and any doubts over her abilities were silenced when she totally destroyed Juliana Pena in their rematch. And sure, Nunes didn't light the world on fire with her retirement fight, but she's put together one hell of a resume. Nunes is the best women's fighter to ever do it, and there isn't an especially close second. Number 7, Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling is a pretty underrated fighter in my opinion, and though his best wins have been narrow, many fighters don't even bring talents like Henry Cejudo or Piotr Jan to close decisions. Sterling has a skill set that is just very hard to contend with, and if he can get past Sean O'Malley and move up to featherweight, who knows how far he can actually go before the decade is out. Number 6, John Jones. I try not to give John Jones too much based on merit alone, but after beating the highly regarded Dominic Reyes in a razor-close fight, and I mean razor close, Jones took about 3 years off and totally ran through the best heavyweight in the UFC at the time, or at least on paper, the former interim champion Cyril Gane, in his own heavyweight debut, and he did it like Gane wasn't even there. Indeed, that's only one clear-cut win with the finish, but I can't help but look at the context here. The time off, the level of opponent, the new division, winning the belt. It's 2-0, but Jones managed to get a lot done, despite his inactivity. Number 5, Leon Edwards. 2 wins over a fighter of Kamaru Usman's stature are just about as good a victory as any fighter has achieved in this era. Throw in his win over Nate Diaz, and it has been a pretty successful time for Leon Rocky Edwards. And despite the thunderous KO that won him the belt, I think the most impressive showcase of the lot came in that more decisive trilogy fight against Usman. That's one hell of a champion, folks. Number 4, Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira will get his chance to win back his lightweight title when he rematches Islam Makhachev later this year. But that loss aside, there is an argument to be made that no fighter has captured the support of the masses this decade quite like do Bronx. And his catalogue of victories since 2020, win for win, can be stacked up against anyone. And even numerically, 6-1, with the majority of them over huge names, is a pretty amazing run. Number 3, Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya joins Jamal Hill and Brandon Moreno as the most active fighters on our list, with 8 fights. But in contrast to them both, every single one of his fights were undisputed title fights. And when he's not winning in dominant fashion, his only losses have come to Poatan, which he later avenged, and in a competitive light heavyweight debut against Jan Blachowicz, one of the breakout stars of the decade, that's for sure. Number 2, Islam Makhachev. In second place, Islam Makhachev has done some remarkable work this decade. Obviously, he has yet to face most of the elite 155-pounders in his radius, but the 2 truly noteworthy victories of his career, that narrow win over Alexander Volkanovski and that total shutout of Charles Oliveira, those are huge feathers in his cap, and I do get the feeling that the best is yet to come from this highly talented champion. Number 1, Alexander Volkanovski. And at number 1, I had to go with Alexander Volkanovski. Sure, he lost a fight to the number 2 in this video, and yes, I did score it for Islam, but Volkanovski still won the moral victory on that night, very clearly, and with 2 of his 3 wins over Max Holloway coming this decade, his finishes of Yair Rodriguez and Chan Sung Jung, and his star-making breakout performance against Brian Ortega, Volk has the strongest run of any fighter in the sport. He's a future GOAT contender in my opinion, if he keeps winning, and him getting the number 1 spot was a pretty easy pick. But do you agree with how this one turned out? Do let us know your opinions in the comments section below, and then show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a single upload. Thank you for watching.